Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, I can.
Yeah, somebody can. That's good.
Can
And
you
I
hear
can
me
hear
well?
myself, so that's wonderful. That's very good. So, hello, everybody in Baku and around the world. We are coming together for the last session of this COP in the Water for Climate Pavilion. Uh, it's a sad feeling that it stops here, but it's also a good feeling because I think we have come from Glasgow and we are going to Belém. So Baku is a stop on the way there, and many good things have been discussed here. Many good ideas, have been developed further, and I think it is really an important part, this Water for Climate Pavilion, in our common strive to provide not only a climate smart world but also a water secure world. So thank you for all of you who have participated in this. But now let our last event in this pavilion for this COP begin. And this is an event that is co-convened by the Brazilian Ministry for Environment. So we have Yara Giacomini online. She is the main organizer and host, together with Seaweed and the Freshwater Challenge. And what we want from this event is to think together how can the restoration really of floodplains, of riverbanks, of wetlands contribute to the global goal on adaptation. What's the way we need to formulate indicators? We need to understand the value that wetlands and riverbank vegetation give us, not only in terms of biodiversity, but also, of course, in terms of climate mitigation or climate adaptation. And this morning, the Baku Dialogue the Baku Water Dialogue for Climate Action was launched, and it is a sign that we are now really getting into this interconnectedness of things. We've had peatlands and wetlands events in the last COPs, but now we have already a mechanism that officially, from the parties, driven by the parties, links these discussions that we have here. And for me, I think is very a beautiful opportunity to have this discussion here today, because I come from a land where wetlands have been fought for centuries. I am German, and where I grew up, it was actually at the border of an old wetland that was drained in the 1700s, because we wanted more agricultural land and we didn't want insects that bred in the floodplains, and we didn't want to get flooded, and we didn't want to swim after our cows who went from one little island in the river valley that was there before to the next. We wanted to live more comfortably, so we actually expelled all this ecosystem service and also climate positivity from our environment. And now we are at the point where we can reinvent and re-establish these services and these positive effects that we can get from riverbank, from spring vegetation, from wetlands, and generally from the relation between ecosystem services or ecosystems and water services. And I would like to invite our first speaker now to give some opening remarks. We have two people who will give opening remarks, and then we will have a discussion with the panelists who are here. So our first guest today is Paola Martinelli. She's representing the Freshwater Challenge. The floor is yours, please.
Thanks, Johannes. Pleasure to be here again. Speaking on the Freshwater Challenge, I think the third time just today. But always a pleasure to speak about something that is so close to my heart, which is, freshwater ecosystems in this initiative. So, 2 years ago, when the inclusion of inland waters in the global environmental framework under the CBD was uncertain, a lot of organizations and champion countries really did an unwavering advocacy to get inland waters there. And that's where the Freshwater Challenge was born out. There was this collective recognition of this urgency. And when the target was set for 30% of restoring and conserving degraded ecosystems, our colleagues at Wetlands International, WWF, calculated how much that would mean in terms of a global goal, and that's how we got to the global goal of 300,000 kilometers of degraded rivers and 350 million hectares of degraded wetlands to be restored and protected. So the Freshwater Challenge was officially launched at the UN Water Conference by 6 countries, Colombia, Mexico, Ecuador, Zambia, DRC, and Gabon. And I think I can change the slide, right? Yes. But now you can see the momentum really picked up. And today we are at 47 countries in the European Union that have joined this ambitious initiative. The last countries to join was actually Panama and joined at CBD COP16 in Cali. And by joining the Freshwater Challenge, these countries are committing to this intention of adding freshwater ecosystem protection and restoration visibly in their relevant national plans. So that can be NDCs, the National Determined Contributions, it can be the National Adaptation Plans, it can be the NBSAPs, can be the LDN targets under the UNCCD Convention. So target setting is one part of the Freshwater Challenge, and what the Freshwater Challenge partners, which includes Wetlands International, WWF, TNC, the Nature Conservancy, IUCN, UNEP, UNCCD, and also collaborating agencies such as the Secretariat on the Commission of Wetlands. What we do is support countries to reach these freshwater targets, these ambitions to reach by 2030. And one of the things that we do and provide when it's a priority of the country is to support with freshwater target setting. But another principle as well is holding national dialogues with the whole of government and whole of society approach. And when needed, when the country would like us to help, we support them in coordinating that. And as well as having a leadership role to keep freshwater ecosystems high at the global stage, at the agendas. So for example, Gabon has been leading a draft resolution on the Freshwater Challenge for the Commission of Wetlands. Those are one of the examples of what been happening at the global stage. And where we are now after 1 year and a half, so as I mentioned, this started at the UN Water Conference in March last year. With the 47 plus, the 45 plus countries, is we are developing the initiative with the countries, talking about some key structural parts of it, resource mobilization, ways of functioning, but also at the national level. There's already a lot of implementation ongoing on the ground. We had a session earlier where we saw what the United States have been doing to implement the freshwater challenge at national level, but Peru is also moving forward. We also had IATA talking about how Brazil is moving forward with the freshwater challenge, and Kenya and so many other countries that are really moving forward with their ambitions on protecting and restoring the their freshwater ecosystems. So now I will give the floor to Yada, I think, or Johannes. Would you take the floor? It's Yada. Okay, Yada, please come in. Thank you.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here at COP29 again, even from far away in Brazil. I'm not able to see you. I think there is some technical problem with the camera. So I don't know if I will share my screen, and I hope you can see, because I can't see you. So thank you first for Paula and Johannes for the opening and for the remarks. This is a very special moment for Brazil, because we will host the next climate COP. So it's also a great opportunity to use this session to create a bridge between the COPs and between the water pavilion as well. So thank you all for being here and help us to create awareness about this topic and the role of the water on the climate and in another global goals as well. So I'd like to present to you the fact that restoring wetlands as a strategic climate action, and this is connected with our, oops, just one moment. Okay, this is connected to our our updated climate national plan. This plan, it has 8 volumes dedicated for mitigation and 15 volumes dedicated for adaptation. And within these 15, we have one dedicated to the water. So I think this is one good way to express the importance of water in the role of climate adaptation. Oops, I'm having some issues here with the PowerPoint, sorry. This plan, it has some premises, which is using the water as a binding element of public policies. Also the interdependence between water and ecosystem dynamics, being in accordance with our federal constitution, finding synergies between the national policies, and it is also based in better evidence science, having water citizenship and climate justice, also important in this plan, and social participation. So from the IPCC reports, the National Water Agency downscale the scenarios and made scenarios for Brazil. We have these scenarios in a autocated watershed scale and also municipal scale for floods, for heating, and for droughts. We have here it's a very innovative approach because ANA also made scenarios for the impact of climate change for indigenous lands and quilombola lands. So it's a first step to climate justice and also for water citizenship. The plan has 2 general objectives. The first one is rehabilitating river basins through coordinated measures that promote sustainable use of natural resources, biodiversity conservation, enhancement water access in quantity and quality, water security, sustainability, and resilience of aquatic ecosystem. And the number 2, developing, negotiating, and implement a multi-level transversal water adaptation strategy, integrating water actors and user sectors and allowing multiple uses and climate justice. So we have 2 main approaches here, one more nature-based one and another for more water governance one. And from these 2 objectives, we have several measurable goals and actions. And one of these actions, which is my favorite one, which is a strategic one, is recovering 1 million hectares of riverbank, springs, and wetlands, and promote the soil conservation in its adjacent areas. And why is this strategic? Because it reaches several benefits at once. So it helps to improve the water cycle regulation, erosion control, carbon sequestration, biodiversity conservation, and here we bring the ecosystem services as well, improving the water quality. It improves the life of the traditional communities, bring cultural preservation, disaster prevention, microclimate regulation that Johannes mentioned in his talking, and food production. And also it helps to implement at once different convention, different international framework. We could here mention many more than I am presenting here for you. So restoring riverbanks, wetlands, and springs, it is a champion action. And then I ask you, should the recovery of riverbank or strategic wetlands be a global goal for adaptation? So I let you the floor with this and let's debate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Yara, for your explanation, and thank you. I think it's a really ambitious target that you have formulated there, and that hopefully will be, yeah, one part of the solution space that we can really show in COP30. So we have ambitions, we have goals, and I think it's very inspirational that you've come up with a topic that links ecosystems, that is also important for forests. Goes without saying that in Brazil we have some of the biggest forests on the planet that are living with water, in water and from water, and that are also the source of life for water, the Pantanal, the Amazon forest, and also some other forests that are on the litoral, on the coastal area of Brazil. So this is really a key aspect, not only for Brazil, but also, of course, for other continents and other countries. Now, I want to invite the people that we have on our panel. I know that Nicolas Franke is running around in the COP. I just received a message from him. He might or he might not join, but we have Michael Alexander from Diageo. Is that the correct way to pronounce it? We have Maaike van Ginneken. She is the envoy for water of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and Shaima is here instead of, Salma is here instead of Shaima from the UAE. Okay, here's Shaima Gargash. She is the director for energy and environment in the UAE Foreign Ministry. So I am happy that you have found time to come to our last session today. Thank you for that. And normally it's ladies first, but in this case, because we have only one guy on our panel, it's guys first. So I want to ask you a little bit, Maaike, if we think about the interlinkages between the ecosystem services that we get from wetlands, but related to climate, what are your views on how can we leverage that? How could we factor that into bringing more private sector participation into fulfilling our joint ambition? And what happens if we don't do that? What would be our cost of failure, so to say? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Johannes, and I'm very pleased to go first for a change. And just to express my thanks to the Pavilion for organising this session, and thank you for coming, because it's a really important session, despite it being last. And briefly, Diageo is a global alcohol beverage company. We produce brands like Johnny Walker and Smirnoff and Gordon's and Tanqueray and Bailey's and Guinness. I think some of you might need some of our products by the end of today. Hopefully you'll manage to get one or two. But seriously, we're a global brand company with production in about 30 countries. About a third of our volume is manufactured in distilleries and breweries in highly water-stressed areas of the world. Mexico, Sub-Saharan Africa, particularly East Africa, India, Turkey, Indonesia. So we have a huge responsibility and a huge dependence. And I think most businesses take water through the lens of risk and multidimensional risk, but our largest climate risk is water. We have to disclose that in our public disclosures around our climate risks, and actually have to put a value at risk in terms of what that means to us. So we have to be active in water. Our biggest impact on nature and our biggest dependency on nature are freshwater ecosystems. So I don't really have to go much further in trying to explain why businesses such as beverage and many food and beverage companies need to be active and engaged on water. And particularly those with extensive agricultural supply chains. So much of our crops are grown by smallholder farmers in very highly water-stressed areas. If the rains don't come, we give them the seed. If the rains don't come, they give us back the seed. It's as simple as that. And we might have to go to another area where the rains have come, and clearly that is not sustainable, it's not resilient, and we need to enable those farming communities and broader catchments to be more resilient. And that's where climate adaptation is. For us, our water strategy is our climate adaptation strategy. And it's very clear that we need to drive better outcomes from that. So what does it look like in practice? So very briefly, a typical corporate water strategy looks like doing the right thing in your own operations. So you don't have the credibility to go out and talk to people about water conservation and ecosystem restoration if you're using too much water, if you're discharging dirty water, and if you're not practicing what you preach. So that's the first stage. Then you need to go out and start to do projects yourself. working with expert partners, because we're not the experts at water, we're the experts making tasty brands. We don't want to pretend to be what we're not. We need to work with expert partners. So that might be very much local NGOs, or it might be large global NGOs such as TNC or WWF. We work a lot with WaterAid as well. We think WASH is the first point of contact, if you like, to engage in local communities that don't have it. So how can we expect our farmers to increase their productivity when their families are walking 8-10 kilometers twice a day to fetch for water? So we need to help and enable access to WASH. But once we've done that, we need to actually work, and probably more importantly, we need to work at a catchment level to really drive systemic change in those catchments. And we're just one stakeholder, and that's why something like the Freshwater Challenge and the commitment to from governments and from countries to commit to freshwater ecosystem restoration is absolutely essential to us, because that gives us a point of contact to engage with government. If government have made that commitment, which we're really delighted they have, and we're encouraging them to do more, and many of the governments listed in the slide before, we're very active in those, whether it's Kenya or whether it's Tanzania or whether it's the US or whether it's the UK. We're very active in all of those markets, and therefore we need to engage with government and see the symbiosis of what we're trying to do and what they're trying to do, and that we can actually help them deliver their commitments by doing our restoration and by continuing to work collaboratively across many different parties to deliver that restoration. A couple of very quick examples of what we're doing on that restoration quickly. So one might be riparian woodlands in the Upper Tana, which is just north of Nairobi. The Upper Tana provides about 90% of Nairobi's water. Nairobi is a highly water-stressed city. We use a lot of water in Nairobi at our brewery making Tusker beer, and we need to address the source of the water stress rather than just using water more efficiently at our brewery. So we work with the Upper Tana Water Trust to help farmers build plant riparian woodlands. They're also helping them store water through water pans, but also building and planting trees along the riparian woodlands to be more climate resilient. Another example might be in Scotland. Now, a bit like the Netherlands, we're not really, when we get 3 weeks of no rain, it's a drought and it's panic. But what does happen in our rivers, our precious rivers, is that the water temperature goes up with intensity of heat. And what that means is we can't discharge the water into the river because it would warm the river too much. So we have hot water coming out from our distilleries. So this has a direct impact. In our sector, it would have millions of pounds of impact on the whiskey distilling sector in a year because of the temperature, because they have to then use lots of energy to put into cooling towers before they can discharge the water. So what we do is we work with the local catchment initiative to plant trees to try and cool the water in parts of the Spey side, for example, where a lot of Scotch whisky is made. So those are just a couple of little examples where restoration and practice. But I actually think the bigger conversation, and I'll stop in a second, the bigger conversation is really about how private sector can engage with government more. I've been doing this work for about 15, 20 years now, and forever there's been a big separation between what private sector does in water stewardship and what government and policy and international and global initiatives do on driving change. And there's a big gap between that. And the gap's still there. You know, there's very few private sector representatives this week at COP having these conversations, which should be celebrated, because there's, the Baku Declaration this morning, fantastic news, but that won't really drop into any private sector inbox because they won't be aware of it and they don't connect it. And we need to make that connection much, much better, because ultimately it is a selfish driver that I want to make that connection. I want to make that connection because I know that in the catchments in Mexico, in Kenya, in India, in Turkey, I know that we will not manage our climate risk and we will not adapt to climate and be able to grow our businesses unless we engage with government to invest and in policies and infrastructure and regulation around climate adaptation. So we need to encourage that investment at a scale that we can impact, but we can influence, hopefully, by working together with other companies and other stakeholders to engage with government. Just one one influencing factor is to try and drive that economic lens, if you like, to say, if we to continue to employ people and contribute to taxes and to drive growth in the economy, we need you to invest in climate adaptation. We need you to set ambitious national adaptation planning. And that's a conversation the private sector is not having at the moment with government. There's still a big gap, and I think opportunities like today, and indeed the Baku Declaration and the Freshwater Challenge, absolutely essential to bridging that gap, and I really strongly encourage it. Thank you, Johannes.
Yeah, thanks for your examples especially. I think it's always super valuable when we have, when we can feel the relation, when you say it's going to cost us millions to cool, or because we're going to be fined if the water's too warm. I think that's a problem that the private sector encounters all over the world. We have the same in the Rhine River Basin, not only in Germany, but we share this with the Netherlands. So that is, of course, a concern that is made tangible, or that, and only then can we create this relation, I think, between governments and the private sector. And just for a fun fact, because I calculated this some weeks ago, we always talk about how much money we need to implement SDGs, and the climate debate is within the SDGs. In Germany, this would be the equivalent. So if we want the SDGs globally, we need around $2,000 a head per year from now on. The German budget, the German national budget, not the private sector, but the government budget is around $6,500 per head and year. So 1/3, we are missing one. We would need to increase the German government budget by 35% or so. Yes, we pay less interest because we are an AAA-rated country or so, but we can't even find the money to improve our local transport system or to renovate the German railways. So it is utterly impossible to reach any sustainable development goal without this common understanding of the private sector and the government sector. So thank you for making this point. I think it's also valuable that we think about how to factor this into the discussions around the global goal on adaptation. Because again, if that's only a theoretic policy goal, we will have a lot of struggle to finance it. And we have seen how difficult the financing discussions are around loss and damage. We have the same in the CCD COP or in the biodiversity COP, and this is one key point that we need to do better from the start in the next ideas that we have around water. And if I speak about the next ideas that we have around water, we have Shaima here from UAE, and next ideas is of course also related to not only what will happen in Belém, but also what will happen in the next UN conference on water that is co-hosted by the UAE and Senegal. So can you give us a little bit of an idea or your thoughts about how adaptation, ecosystem services, and also this private sector connection could be supported or could be jointly looked at for the water conference?
So first of all, thank you for inviting me, and we have been kind of strong advocates for the wetlands since COP28. We understand the importance of preserving and conserving natural resources, especially that the UAE also comes from a region that is really water scarce, and so we truly value the importance of water, but also understand the importance of it on the ecosystem and the economy. For us as the UAE, we also import more than 90% of the goods and services. And so for us, every little impact on the ecosystem globally impacts us. And so there's this global cycle and kind of this trickle effect that happens globally, being a very open economy. We understand the severity of water. We understand the importance of partnerships. And we understand that the private-public partnership is one of the key drivers, because we can only do so much from a government standpoint, but the main implementers are the private sector. But when we talk about the private sector, we also talk about the local communities. We talk about the communities. We talk about the scientists, and everyone has a stake to play in. we may not be known as a country that has wetlands, but we do have mangroves, so we truly understand the importance of nature-based solutions as well. Carbon capture. When we look at natural resources, we truly care about the impact on the lives and livelihoods of people. And so with COP28, that was a big emphasis that we've really played a crucial role. And the outcomes, the action agenda items would not have been achieved without bringing in everyone to the table. And I think again, the solutions are out there. It's just a matter of how are we going to start and when we're going to start. And it's always, we as humans like to overcomplicate things. And so which makes it really overwhelming, but someone needs to start, right? Brazil is really taking this forward. We will continue that to COP30, but we'll also continue that to the UN 2026 Water Conference. And again, I think we no longer can say that it's related to a certain country or not, because again, we look at it from a holistic global economy and a global kind of impact. It's truly borderless. And as UAE, we've been quite known to be conveners, but also kind of drivers of change, and kind of we truly believe in the impact, the positive impact on economic growth, on stability. That's also very key. But we also have been in the field of development for a really long time. And so our road to UN 2026 Water Conference with Senegal, I think, is a beautiful matchmake, because they bring in something to the table, and so do we as the UAE, coming in also from two really critical regions when we talk about water and the importance of valuing water. And so it feels like a very harmonic kind of smooth transition from COP29, from the UN 2023 Water Conference actually, to COP28, to COP29, and then moving it forward to the Ramsar Convention, moving on to potentially the upcoming Water Investments Summit in Africa, South Africa taking the lead. And so it's a wonderful drive towards kind of the importance and looking at water from the full spectrum. And so the 2026 Water Conference hopefully will not only be the end, but a major milestone and a stepping stone to continuing efforts towards sustaining and conserving, bringing in every stakeholder, from the funders to the innovators to the local communities in the capacity building. And I think as UAE, we're just taking kind of the baton from the Netherlands and Tajikistan, and we're taking that to that next level, making sure that we continue the momentum from COP to COP, but also beyond the COPs as well.
Yeah, thank you, Shaima, and thank you also for mentioning, you have alluded to the fact that we need peace and stability. I mean, this is a world at the moment where people are basically every other week incrementally making conflicts worse with firing ever more destructive weapons at each other and stuff like that. So here is an offer from the UAE, I think, to present some little pieces of the puzzle or some modular possibilities for people to work more together. So we talk about wetlands, but from the wetlands, through all this craziness that we're living through, there's even a link to peace and security. And I think if we can make people understand that a little better, then we should also have less problems in convincing the people if they want to. In the end, the investment that we need is huge in Brazil for 1 million hectares. That's a lot, but the benefit that we will get from that, of course, is much larger. So if we can create these, if we can make it tangible that the people benefit in different sectors from investing together in something like a wetland restoration, I think then that is a good recipe for success. So I still don't see Nicholas here, so maybe he already ran into a Johnny Walker or something else. I don't know. Yeah, it's understandable, I think, on the last day of COP. But Maaike is here. Maaike, can you take over the microphone from
Yes,
Shaima?
I can.
And, the Netherlands is one of the countries that have for a long time pioneered water solutions, also because of your special condition in your country. So, and you will be with us in this whole way forward now. Especially, one of the driving forces, I think, for the discussions around the global goal on adaptation was always the Netherlands delegations in New York, in wherever the COP was. Can you give us a little bit of a feeling or your advice or your view on how we can factor in something like more, or how can we relate indicators on ecosystems, on wetlands, on floodplains with the global goal on adaptation?
Yeah, thank you very much, and very interesting discussion, although you make me a little bit thirsty. Last year was important because we had the UAE framework on global climate resilience, which is a really big step forward on climate adaptation. I really liked that you said your climate adaptation strategy is your water strategy, because I think they're very interrelated. And now we're working, all the parties to the UNFCCC, on defining indicators, and that program should be finished next year at COP30. So this year, during the negotiations, there's a lot of discussions on the methodology, how we're going to get there. And then next year, we hopefully will have the indicators. I understood from our delegation who's negotiating that at the moment there's 9,000 indicators. That might be a little bit much. And I think we need indicators that really look at the core of adaptation. And I think the worst we can do is actually have a list of energy indicators, a list of water sector indicators, a list of transport indicators, etc., etc. And what we should warn ourselves for is that our measure of success next year in Brazil is not how many water indicators there will be. Because then we're going to say, oh, we have 20, and somebody else is going to say, oh, we have 21. That's not going to be workable, nor is it useful. So I think we really have to go back to what is climate adaptation, and it's a very integrated approach. People feel climate through water. So water is central to it. Water needs to be central to the solution. The more I think about it, I actually think spatial planning is really important. What do you do where? How do you reserve space for wetlands, for lakes, for rivers, for floodplains? Because if you think about climate change, it's all about more concentrated rainfall and about longer periods of no rain. And that means that you need water buffers. You need space to store excess water, and you need water buffers for dry periods, even if they're only 3 weeks. We need that now in the Netherlands. And 99% of water storage is in nature. So we need to restore wetlands, we need to restore floodplains, restore lakes, and really not only value them for their intrinsic value of biodiversity, that's certainly there, but also truly as an integrated part of our water cycle. Because I think in some countries, you mentioned Germany, we're downstream the Netherlands, we kind of forgot that as a matter of philosophy. We canalized our rivers, all the water went out as rapidly as possible, and we thought that all that green stuff didn't need to be part of it. The Global Commission on the Economics of Water that has launched a report not so long ago, they're actually talking about green water and the water in the soil. So farmers are really important in this. So we really need to think that integrated approach. We need to think about how these sectors come together. And when we think about these indicators, we need to keep that in mind. And I think we have a year till the Brazil COP, a year to think about those indicators. There's a lot of people thinking about it. No, there's experts, there's parties to UNFCCC, so it's not that easy as a process. But I think the main thing is to think in an integrated manner, to really think about, okay, what do we really need? The surface area of wetlands might, for instance, be quite a good one. Well, getting to really, really detailed, water quality indicators or water temperature indicators, if we do that and everybody here around, every pavilion does that, then we end up with 1,000 indicators, which is meaningless. So let's do a few good ones that we know that can be measured by all countries. They're not too complex. And with that, really think about it. And I think this integrated approach with water being in the middle, spatial planning and storage, a very central part of that. I want to break the rules of the game because it's the last session. No, I had a question for Michael. Is that okay? Yeah. Because Michael said that he wanted to work more with governments, and you explained how you kind of do your wetland restoration and your watershed restoration yourself, being from a government and thinking in a pretty public mode. I then think, why are these guys who are making whiskey, and you said you're not water managers, why are they doing this themselves? No, in a nicely well-organized government, the government would say to you, hey, you pay for ecosystem services, you pay a little bit more money, and we use that money to do that upstream watershed management. We use that money to do wetlands. That means that there's no free riders because everybody needs to do that. Why is this what you want to do for the rest of your career and Johnny Walker for another 1,000 years because they will always walk on? Or is it second best, and would this be better done through these kind of ecosystem services and payment for it? Because it's a hot topic. Yeah, so that's my question, sorry.
Thank you, Mika. It's a great question, but so the answer, it happens a little bit. So we are co-financing often with government, but it's at a very small scale, right? So it's not the scale you're talking about, it's not the structures and systems that your idyllic kind of solution might be in terms of ecosystem tax, as it were, for everybody, depending on how much Johnny Walker they're producing or how much water they're using. So I think that the challenge for private, I agree with the concept, the challenge for private sector is that it's all about their own backyard, right? So there's a lot of that. It's what's good for us and how we're going to make sure that we're doing what we need to do for our own strategy. And that's where the thinking has to broaden out a lot more. So Johannes and many others would have heard a lot about private sector talking about water collective action. And there's initiatives such as the Water Resilience Coalition, 100 Basins, there's the Alliance for Water Stewardship, Collective Action Accelerator, and there's many other different organizations, but those two come to mind, which are absolutely trying to organize that a bit better. You're absolutely right, it's inefficient, it's very inefficient, and it's also very small scale, and it's not having the impact we need for it to have. We recognize that, but we're starting somewhere. So these initiatives are much more about convening bigger groups of water users with government decision makers, with civil society and NGOs to have a much more inclusive and a much more scalable type of approach, which is consistent with what government want to deliver. Different financial mechanisms might be used in different countries, but it's absolutely about having the private sector doing their bit to deliver the master plan, if you like, for the catchment, of which they're not clear about at the moment. They don't know how they can take a role. They know what the regulations are. They know what the discharge permits might be, or they know what the withdrawal permits might be. They know all of that kind of technical stuff, but they don't know how the soft diplomacy of how we work with a broader at a catchment level. So I do think there's a lot of sense in what you say. I think we're obviously quite a long way away from that. But there are global initiatives, such as I've mentioned, that are really trying to drive that collective action and get companies to work better. Companies aren't working well enough together, and they're too isolated and too small, and it's not having a big enough impact. So, we strongly encourage that, and but we only participate where it's relevant to us. To the earlier point I was making, but there's a lot of companies out there, and they should all be participating in lots. So that's why it's 100 basins and not 10 basins.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think this Mike's question was a good one because it also targeted a question that was also discussed in terms of, what does the okay ecosystem look like, or what's a resilient solution, or and if we have 231 indicators in the SDGs and we can't get that straight, imagine we have more in the global goal on adaptation, it will go even more wrong. So it is also true that people, when they are confronted with complexity, then they go to heuristics, then they run through the middle door, then they take what they know of, or they react with a choice that they can handle. And I think the decomplexifying of the issue is important, and we can do that. And you have basically all mentioned a couple of ideas that go to we need to go away from monoculture, be that in agriculture or in economy or in our heads. Monoculture kills us because then monoculture forests are deadly. We have to invest a lot to diversify the forests. And I think to make it simple, we have to create diversity. The people perceive that as a threat first because, strangers in my country or so, people of different color, but diversity is the key to resilience. And monoculture is our enemy. And another very simple factor is, yes, we have floods and droughts, but overall we are at the moment drying out our land, and the WMO, and Nicholas is not here, have reported on that. 23 was the driest year in terms of river runoff, so we are losing water from our land systems and ecosystems, and that doesn't disappear into space, it goes into the oceans, it's part of sea level rise, it's a logical consequence of a process that we see. So can we reverse that? Can we, Micah said it, can we store more water? Can we rehydrate our diversified systems? It's not, the overall goal is not very complicated, and we just need to make sure that we have a diverse landscape of actors to create this diverse environment and economic and social system. We are a bit ahead of time, but I think that doesn't matter so much if it's the last event at the booth. I want to ask Yara if she's still online and if she wants to come back in with a last reflection. And I also see that Shaima probably needs to leave, so if you have to run off, if you want to come in with a last short statement, and then I would give the floor to Yara.
Thank you. I think in terms of kind of last reflections on this is I think we need to look at everything in a very global manner, that everything is interconnected, and that economies and societies will have touch points at some point, and these touch points are getting closer and more frequent. And so again, from our standpoint, being a very kind of globalized society, we really need to understand that one small thing will end up becoming very big, and big things become very, very small or disappear. And that we all need each other in this globe, and that everyone adds to a bigger picture. And I think we need to look at it from truly an economic, how do we scale economies? How do we positively grow economies? And because without that circularity, there won't be any drive to change. And so I think we need to look at, in terms of valuing water, how it is part of a broader ecosystem, and that everyone needs to play a big role. And I think also think outside the box and bring in unconventional partners, such as the UAE in this, where everyone brings in a certain perspective, because everyone is impacted by these global changes.
Thanks a lot, and full understanding if you have to quickly run off and do the last tweaks to the COP. Yara, do you want to come back in? Do you have some reflections on what has been discussed here? What is your feeling about bringing this in a positive way to COP30?
Thank you, Johannes. It was like very good discussion and inputs and food for the brain. And I really agree with the words of Make brought. I think we should make an effort to bring the integrative aspect of water again, and not only talking about it, but trying to quantify the impact that these actions have across a broader spectrum. We have been for a long time highlighting which is the nexus: water, food, water, energy, water, and something else. But I think in somehow, although it was not the intention, we separated the stakeholders, which should be together on the table discussing. If one couldn't see his interests or approaches or views on the table, then this person won't come to discuss and to be part of the solution. And water is not a sector. So we shouldn't separate it or treat it as a sector, because then we'll have the work to bring it together, because it is how the water cycle works, we like it or not. So I think this is very important, and bring it to the ground. I have been talking to mayors and also with RBO, regional RBO presidents, and they keep asking us, I want to adapt, I want to do something for the climate change, but what I should do in practice in an objective way. So we start to think here with Anna, with us, which are the strategic actions that we could suggest to mayors, to the people who are on the ground, to really put in practice, and which are, I don't know, some kind of a roadmap for adaptation for these people who are not directly connected with the water, but they want to do something. We need to be more assertive on our communication to make things happen on the ground. And last, I would say how important it is for us to connect the different levels of water governance. Discussions that we are having here, it should arrive in the River Basin Committee, the small ones who are on the ground. Otherwise, we cannot leverage their plans. We cannot help them to improve their plans, bring the adaptation, the ecosystems approach in need. So here in Brazil, we are trying to develop, to improve the methodology, to develop the river basin plans together with Anna. And in these efforts, also connecting this level of governance and allowing or creating channels that even money from international organizations or international donors could be used to leverage regional river basin plans with this adaptation or mitigation approach in it. So I think we have a long path away, but I think the discussion is very good and we can connect it and think about it. What do we want to deliver in water for the COP30 and then for the UN Water Conference in 26? So I think we still have time to work on this. And so this session, it won't finish here. It will continue in the next weeks and months. Thank you, Johannes.
Yeah, thank you, Yara, for being here, and thank you. I think it's also important that we know that the country that will host the next COP is with us in the closing of this COP when it comes to water. Thank you for your leadership here. I want to now give Maike and Michael, it's an M&M, but that's not in your company's portfolio, no? No, maybe you should invest in little sweet stuff. My kids would appreciate that more than Johnny Walker, but Maike, do you want to start with the last comment?
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, we need those global events, right? Because we need to come together, we need to agree on stuff, and it's really important. And agreeing on the global goal of adaptation, the indicators for the global goal of adaptation is important. Hopefully you say it's the last day of the COP. I think these people negotiating might have 1 or 2 days more, but hopefully they won't go home before we get a deal here. It's really important. But we also need to work at the national level and the local level. And I think the title of this session also had national adaptation plans in it. And also next year, 2025, countries need to do their national adaptation plans. And I think there's one thing this session shows is that everybody needs to be around the table, and it includes the private sector. It includes different people from different ministries, and the worst it can be is just the list of investment projects, because that's not enough. One example from my country, our national adaptation strategy, just to contradict Michael a little bit, because that's always nice. We actually are getting some private sector participants in this discussion, and they're actually not the ones that you would immediately think about, but actually our banking sector and our insurance sector is coming there, and that's because we have a lot of flood problems, and the banks are worried about their portfolio of mortgages, because if houses get structural damage because of water damage, they have a problem, and the insurance company want to make sure that the flood regulations and the spatial planning regulations that the government is developing as part of our national adaptation strategy actually are in line with them, because then they can just say, okay, if you're outside of regulation, we don't insure you. And I think thinking about what's the self-interest of a company, right? It might be the lack of water in a very water-scarce area. It might be the value of your mortgage portfolio. I think we need to think about these dynamics. So that's at the national scale, because we want better national adaptation plans in 2025. The real action is at the farm level, at the wetland level, at the basin level, at the city level, at the subnational level. I just took a copy of the Water Action Agenda magazine that I will give to you, because I've made it difficult. Look, at the UN Water Conference 2023, I think there were 873 promises, commitments to do action. And that's in full swing now. Everybody is taking action. And I really hope that in the UN conference in 2026, we will build on this. I give it to you because I hope there will be more private sector actions in it. And we really also need to not only have these kind of big events and agreements, we need that, but we need action, action, action on the ground.
I'll be very quick, and I agree we need action. I agree totally with what you said. The thing I would say in addition to that is, from a private sector perspective, is the complexity of what goes on in water around these halls and around the global conversations and the UN, way and above what private sector individual companies can possibly kind of understand and, I suppose, translate into what it means for them. So aligned to what I was saying earlier about private sector engagement government, where they can and where it's appropriate, to simplify that roadmap, that pathway for businesses, be very specific to businesses and say, this is how you can help. You can invest in nature-based solutions, you can build capability, you can try and collaborate with civil society and NGOs to influence government to invest in adaptation. So I think simplifying it, and by simplifying it, you make compromises, but I think that's important to try and get that message. A lot of this comes down to communication, and I think at the moment it's very confusing, even for huge, big multinational companies like ourselves and bigger. It's very confusing knowing what the right thing to do is and where and when. And we need guidance from the experts, those that are dyed in the wool with the UN system, that really understand it and can really make the kind of thought leadership connections, because I don't think the UN system, dare I say it, always does. The connections between, well, how can it work on the ground, and what some companies want to do on the ground, and what the private sector has to contribute to the solutions, and I don't think that really works. Anything that the experts in the room, in the halls, can do to try and simplify that and make it very clear what the expectations is of companies to deliver what they should be delivering and what they should be responsible for is very important. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, that's the perfect closing statement. I don't want to add to that, but I want to do one thing before everybody runs off. Dani is here from Siwi, and this is the last act in our water pavilion for this year. Can you come up? And I mean, she is the main organizer, not only she and the other team in Siwi are the main organizers of this, supported by many other people, but still I would like you, as representing all of these people who have dedicated so much time, nerve and sweat, and coming here early to arrange it all. Dani, thank you for being in the lead for this, and I hope that you can say a few words to not only the people who are still here, but also to everybody who is connected online.
Yeah, thank you so much, Johannes. I really appreciate having the opportunity to say a few thank yous. And we see who are the die-hard champions for water in the room, who are still here in the last hour of the last day. I just, first of all, core partners, they're on the wall. They're the ones that we do this for. They're the ones that participate and support us. And this pavilion is what they make of it. So in addition, I wrote them all down because I was afraid of forgetting someone. So in addition, we have the financing partners, the steering committee members, the thematic coordinators, the session organizers, the speakers and the participants, our envoys, are people who take these messages and bring them into other spaces. And also, let's not forget those who are following online. we had 40 sessions, we had a lot of spontaneous conversations, and we have these 10 or so working groups, and these working groups are meant to continue to working throughout the year. So we would encourage you to join those groups as we advance to the next COPs, to the 2026 conference, and to all of the other international events that are there. Also want to give a big shout out to the tech support over there in the corner. Thank you so much. Also to all of my CWE colleagues, we could not have done this without everyone here. All the coordination. So that is Thomas Remark, who I don't know, I think he's in the room there. It's Maggie, who is leading some of the international policy spaces. It's Ivan, who's sitting there leading on some of the working groups as well. It's Manu, who I don't know is also walking around somewhere. It's Christine, who has done such a fantastic job of bringing the messages to the media and to the partners. It's Suzanne, who was here last week, that did a fantastic job in the inauguration. And it's all the whole team back in Stockholm, especially Maribel, who is a webmaster and who made sure that the virtual engagement works seamlessly. So we don't stop here. We're going to keep on going until the next COP. And thank you, everyone for your support. And thank God it's over.
Should we take a last picture?
Sure, good. Yeah. My last session. Yeah.